there's very little, from an educational perspective. So we need to do that before we go.
Well, if we do this well, I hope by 4:30 we can have a mock grant done.
Oh, there we go. Awesome.
You must be omnipotent, girl. Because let me tell you, you're in the slow class.
If you go to Ferndale, you will see a lovely pocket park that they did in 3 phases that came at the end of a grant management seminar because they said, we'll never be able to write a district grant. I said, oh, don't challenge me.
Well, Jay says he doesn't know anybody that knows more about this than Janet, so we're in good hands.
So, I gave this a lot of thought because there's nothing I like to talk about more than foundation and grants. In fact, I'll be going to Pennsylvania in a couple of weeks and then the district can take up to half that money and then pass it out to clubs. Global grants are a whole different animal, and I'm not even going to talk about that today. The foundation awards this money to the clubs. The partner can be local or international, but you don't have to have a partner. It can just be the club doing a project on its own.
Just a quick question on roughly how much money is that currently for our district? I mean, ballpark.
Our district has increased its giving because a lot of clubs have really worked with things like RI Direct, and people having it taken out monthly, like out of a credit card. So we've really, and especially the year that we did the 100th birthday of the foundation, and we did that $1 million dinner, the legacy dinner. So we're up to close to like $190-some thousand in giving. So if you take half of that a year. So if you're getting up near that amount, and some of that's polio, but if you can get like $60,000-70,000 in annual fund, in the half of the annual fund, then that becomes about $37,000, $38,000,
So it's a
$40,000.
50% match, right?
Yeah, 50% match, yeah, so that's about the amount of money.
Of our contribution or of the total project? It's of our contribution in the fact.
It works out to be, and that's in the application itself, it works out to be that I think the maximum has been about $2,500 for a project,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
about $2,500.
that's what Jay and Linda have always been able to get.
The project though itself is 5,000.
Yeah.
The grant from the
Well,
district
to
would
get
be
the 2,500, the project would have to be 7,500.
75, okay, it's 50% of the,
Yeah.
yeah.
The district grant has to relate to the Rotary's mission, and the global grants have to relate to the areas of focus. It's a significant difference. Only has to relate to the mission of the foundation, which means that it can be a lot more liberal in terms of
Okay.
where the district grant goes.
Say the district one more time, please.
If you look
No,
at
no,
scope-
no, just those 3 words.
if you look at the scope or vision, a district grant relates to the foundation's mission.
Thank you.
Does not have to fit with an area of focus. So basically, it does good in the world. If it does good in the world, you can find a reason for it. It can be funded. It's short-term, it's one-time, and it's a lot smaller in scope, so you don't get into the long-term sustainability. It can be educational, it can be vocational or humanitarian, that's the same for both. It's a much shorter planning process in comparison to a global grant. But just exactly like a global grant, there has to be active Rotarian participation.
Is there, you have already had to invest your $5,000 to get the 2,500?
You have to say that you're going to have it available
Okay.
at the time that you get the grant.
Is that grant money only available for a calendar, or for a year? If you don't spend it, do you lose it?
Yes, but sometimes things happen like, you're doing a playground project and the township says, there was a zoning issue with the property and it's gonna be delayed and it's not gonna happen until August, and so it's gonna be into the next Rotary year. Then a report gets written saying that this is how far we are, and
So on an exception basis,
and so then
it can
it's,
be extended.
then the report is just sent in
It
with
doesn't
that.
come out of next year's
No.
money, it comes, okay.
No. No, the club has been written, the check is deposited, the check,
Okay,
and everybody's free and clear. And then as soon as the project is done, then the final report is sent in.
Okay.
But you'd still be responsible, the club would still be responsible on the due date for the interim report with that explanation and documentation.
okay.
Right, so,
On
Thank
the other
you.
hand, we couldn't go out here to Rotary Park and claim the $100,000 we've spent in the last
no,
decade.
has to be new money,
Okay.
has to be new
So
money.
if we wanna do Innovation Park,
Mhm.
this could be a funding source for
Yep.
that.
Yes, absolutely. Conceptually, when the Rotary Foundation looks at giving a district funding, even though it's our money and it comes back to us, Jay is foundation chair. Oh, and I wanted to give you this as well. This is the foundation committee for 2018-19. Every district is required to have a foundation committee. The district governor appoints the foundation chair, and then the foundation chair is responsible for finding the members who make up the foundation committee. And then our district has a policy and procedures manual that says who's on the committee. I'm listed on here as the zone, but it didn't fit in the block. It's also because I'm responsible for our districts. We have a global grant with Ghana, and I'm the person on the global grant with Ghana. So this is who's on the foundation committee. So when Jay Eastman and Joe Bauman, as our district grants chair, send that district block grant in, let's say that, oh, thank you.
Hey, Phil.
How are you guys?
You feel
Is that mine? Good, I
Yeah.
thought I lost it.
Oh,
How are you guys?
Am I in the same
Good.
line?
You're kinda just a couple cars down.
Okay.
How'd you manage to get the premier parking spot?
Living right.
Good living, good living. So,
You got two more today.
Oh.
Keep the hammer down. You know? I mean, Phil, we're being blessed, you know? That's all we could look at.
yeah, I was saying walking in, it's been a banner 24 hours. Last night, my office, I came out of my 5 o'clock session at 5 minutes of 6, and it sounded like the rainforest. The water tank had blown in the kitchen
Oh,
area.
no.
And then this morning on the way in, I was rushing because I had to meet the plumber there so he could put the new water tank in. And I get the signal from OnStar that your tire pressure is going down in your left tire.
Oh.
And I'm on 59 going, I am gonna make it there. Because we're gonna have water in the office today. And so Phil rescued me and we traded cars, and he took it to Bell Tire. And they said, I have the record for most nails in the tires.
Wow.
Of any
This
customer.
seems like this could be a good list, Ernie. I mean, as far as who we wanna plug into
Yeah.
the district.
It is a good list. Yeah, it is a good list. So when Jay and Joe send that block grant in, let's say that they give 15 grants this year, sake of discussion. Whoever types that list in, and I remember typing that list in the years I was foundation chair, you type the list in, and you have to put in all the information, it's basic information. It goes into Rotary International, and somebody there reviews it. And it either gets approved as an entire block grant, or it gets denied.
Oh, and you only get one time at bat?
No, they'll let you correct it.
Okay.
And so, we were in a situation one year where there was one club that had a grant, and it was with a foreign country. And we learned the hard way that there was a document that was needed for that country. So it just took a couple weeks, but now, for
Yeah.
that country, we always require that document. And it was just a quirky change in the laws, that for India, you have to have a particular document because of situations that can occur with money in India, of who's going to be, of the banking. So, anyway, you live and learn. So that block grant is approved in its entirety, which is why it's imperative for that grants committee to be very particular in how they review the grants. The way
So
that,
let me just understand, you're saying, so the district's gonna get 10 projects submitted for,
hopefully they'll get about 25.
okay, 25. They'll select whatever the dollar amount that they think are the most appropriate. Then that is all put into a block request that goes to the Rotary Foundation.
It's all online, yep.
Okay,
So they type in Ann Arbor North,
yeah,
Clawson, every
Yeah.
club, Rochester's, I remember one year typing it in, I think Rochester had 4 grants. Linda had Preschool U, and there were several of them that Rochester had. So you type them all in, and then you can have a little bit for management, you know, for postage, whatever, if you needed it. We rarely do. You can have a contingency fund. I think one year we had a contingency fund, and it was the year there was a tornado in Dexter,
Oh, yeah.
and there was a quick grant written to do something there. We went to our contingency fund.
so if you submit 8 requests, 8 projects, and they like 7 of them, but number 8, what happens? We don't think that.
They come back to you and say, we like all of, they're not going to like or dislike all of them. They're just going to make sure that you've dotted all your i's and crossed all your t's.
Okay.
Because we are because the foundation is a 501c3, and they are audited. And you'll hear all this Saturday, you'll have to go through a grant management seminar. And because the club is responsible for keeping the records. And so they wanna make sure that everything in those grant applications is like it's supposed to be. And that it's fitting the mission of the foundation, and that there's been that the accountability is built in. The biggest thing that would cause a grant to get denied, and everybody knows not to approve a grant that would be that situation, is that there's no Rotarian involvement. Like, you can't approve you can't approve a grant that's going to write a check. You can't say, we love Neighborhood House, so we're going to write a grant and give them money because they're great.
Okay.
You can't do it. You can write a grant that says, we're going to do a project to add a room at Neighborhood House for families to do whatever, and so we're going to need paint and supplies, and we're going to do tutoring in that room and whatever. That's a project. So that's the difference. And this take action word, everything now that's done with Rotary has to do with Rotarians taking action. And so everything that we're doing when we think about grants, think about public relations and think about membership as you're doing it. Because anything that's done with a grant, we should think about what it's doing for the community, or what it's doing if it's an international project, what it's doing internationally, because that can still be publicized. Because it's always Rotarians in action doing something that makes a difference in the world. Grants can be written that involve Interact, grants can be written that involve projects with Rotaract, grants can be written that involve new generations, bringing people into Rotary, grants can be written with Youth Exchange, grants could be written that involve RILA. I mean, it's just endless. So, you know, that's really in terms of how we were trying to get the district governors to think, how we were trying to get, I wasn't in on your training at PETS, but how we wanted presidents to think and clubs to think is in terms of that it's not, here's district grants sitting over here. But that district grants should be an extension of, this is what the club does in the community. That members in the club are really aware of what our community needs, or what are we doing internationally. There's 2 ways that clubs use district grants. One way they use district grants is to meet community needs. Another way they use district grants is as pilots for global grants. Somebody might be aware of a need in a country, and so they want to try it out, and they'll do a small global grant, a small district grant somewhere, and see how it works. I remember working with Jay and Linda when we did the giant $120,000 Future Vision grant that we didn't know would evoke an audit, but we passed with flying colors. And I think that they told me that they may have started that whole project in Guatemala with a small district grant. And I know there have been multiple district grants that have supported things there.
That's what I remember.
Ann Arbor, their first foray into Haiti was a small district grant. And then multiple things that they've done since then have been small district grants.
So, but let me understand this. So let's just say we wanted to do a project in Haiti and we had, everything. Would that qualify for a district grant?
Absolutely.
Well, if you were going to, whatever you were gonna do in Haiti, you could trial or pilot here.
Mhm.
Is that right, Janet?
No, you would do it in Haiti.
You do it in
Oh,
Haiti?
you
Yeah.
do it in
Yeah,
Haiti?
yeah.
So, but it would
But
just
the-
be a very small.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah,
got it.
I've been to Haiti. Let's say that I decide I'm gonna go back to Haiti and visit my friend at the Rotary Club of whatever in Haiti, and I come back and I'm all jazzed up and I say, I go and I come to the appropriate people in the Rochester Rotary Club and say, could we consider a district grant to, help at this orphanage in Haiti that needs whatever? And you guys all decide, hey, that sounds like great.
But you do have to have a local club.
Yes, I'd have a
involved.
local club because we wanna have some boots, some contact on the ground there. And we don't necessarily have to go. But you say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Or I find out that they have a medical situation that's a lot like what Jay and Linda have been dealing with in Guatemala. And you say, wow, that sounds like a lot like what we've been doing there. Yeah, we'd like to do that. Or the
So-
literacy thing like what they've been doing. So we decide to do it. We could do a district grant there.
So, Jay and Linda's projects in Guatemala
Mhm.
have received $2,500 the last couple of years. In fact, I think one year they had two of those. Pardon me. But that was a district grant we got, not anything from the international or global organization, right?
Right. I pulled 2016-17,
Okay.
just to give you some examples. So that year Rochester received 3 grants. And I was surprised because I know I've seen a lot of local grants that you've done, but that year all 3 were international. 2 of them were Linda Eastman grants for Guatemala. One was a women's health grant, and one was a middle school library. And I think the middle school
Yeah.
library must have been Guatemala because I don't
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
think it was here.
Yeah, that's where they got the people that sell the books down there to basically donate them.
Yep. And then Rhonda Panzak did a Ghana sick bay one.
Yeah.
I remember that one. Clarkston did a project at the Lighthouse. That was a really neat project. They helped develop something at the Lighthouse that really enhanced their programming in a new location. And then they also, that same year, did an international project in Kenya. So they did a local and an international. And then it was really neat. Birmingham, West Bloomfield, and Troy all worked together and submitted 3 separate grants, but they were all grants that had to do with the turkey trot.
Okay, yeah.
And that was really, a lot of times, projects, clubs will work together. Troy did one that had to do with the water training, and that's an Eileen Heasley thing, and she did one that was a variation on that. This year it's happening on the 29th.
I'm sorry, you lost me on, you said the grant with Birmingham, the 3 clubs, what was that?
It was called the Turkey Trot.
What was it?
They do Thanksgiving, kinda like we do a Christmas time at St. Paul's, you know, take a meal to a family. Isn't that
Okay,
right?
so it was donating meal, okay,
Well,
Right.
Meals on Wheels.
Right.
I looked into this and did I talk to you, Wayne, about this?
Yes, yeah, you successfully delegated it up to me.
And they
Be
work with
careful.
Kroger's. Our commitment would be $1,000 and it buys 10 meals, so it's $100 a meal. And then they would apply for a $500 grant, making it $1,500. And what they do is they pick the meal up on Christmas morning from Kroger's and they deliver it to the families that day, and they're trying to be done by 10 o'clock in the
It's on
morning,
Thanksgiving, don't you, Tom?
Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I was just curious as to what that.
I thought, Wayne and I
Turkey
talked
trot?
about it, and
Sounded
thought-
like a race to me.
Yeah, I thought it was a 5K.
yeah.
Well,
No, it is a race.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
they see, but yeah, it was kind of neat because I think that Birmingham did it first and then they,
Troy picked up on it too or something?
They got it up to almost
I forget who
300
did it
meals
first,
now.
but some-
So how did those clubs raise the matching funds? Was there any unique thing they did there? Do you
Birmingham, it was very cool what Birmingham did. One of the things that they did, they have a member who went online, who does this online thing and sells clothing, Rotary
Oh,
clothing,
yeah.
through a
Oh.
licensed vendor.
Hmm.
And a lot of people want Rotary clothing,
Yeah.
but don't have a way to get it, and so she does it like
Hmm.
once a year
Interesting.
and
So-
makes it available. And, in fact, she got me in Montreal, or no, Montreal, at one of the conventions.
So,
And I, maybe it was Toronto, anyway, she got me at one of the conventions, I think it was Toronto, and I bought ordered some of the stuff.
So.
I'm not gonna tell you
just
what I had first. to
Playing
drink, but-
devil's advocate or trying to understand the process. So what if we said we were gonna do that, and we had somebody who was gonna go online, and we weren't able to raise the funds? What would happen? Let's say we needed 5,000, we only raised 4. I mean, obviously, the club could kick in the difference. Is
You
that
can
what
do-
typically
yeah,
happens?
You can
or-
do it any way you wanna do it.
But you have to come up with the money.
have
If you
to
wanna do your
fulfill the
project.
commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, you've defined a project that's going to cost that
Cost,
much
yeah.
money, right. I just gave you this list because I want to give you some examples, some ideas of what
Janet,
people
one
do.
of the misconceptions I had is that there was a new program that the district could give out local grants. And all along, all the grants are local. They could be for an international or a local grant.
International or local.
Okay,
Yeah, Birmingham that same year, for as long as I can remember, Birmingham has supported and done amazing literacy projects with a school in Detroit. But, and they would, just as we did, have the superintendent from Birmingham schools regularly come in and talk about yay Birmingham schools.
Mhm.
And take great pride in the wonderful things going on in their community. But they began to ask some questions and say, wait a minute, if we're doing a turkey trot, what's happening with these kids in these families? So they found out that there were literacy issues in Birmingham. So, all of a sudden, what appeared from Birmingham was a grant, where is it, I just lost it. But anyway, what appeared from Birmingham was a literacy grant. And they began doing exactly the same thing in Birmingham that they were doing in Detroit, because there was the same need.
yeah,
And that's what Linda did with her preschool
Yeah.
U, because there is the same need in Rochester that there is
yeah,
in Pontiac. So, it's just interesting. I just wanna mention another one that some of these projects are just astounding. There's a project, let's see if I can find which club did it. Lakes area. It's called Scarlet Smile. And it's a playground, and it's for physically and otherwise, health impaired kids. And it started on a very small scale with a little district grant. And then this thing has taken on a life of its own. And it has grown and grown and grown. If any of you know Lori and Paul McVeigh, it was Lori's thing. And she had some reasons for doing it, but it has grown and grown and grown, and it has become a signature project for Lakes area. The whole community knows. And
Margaret Mead all over again.
And when they had this ribbon cutting for its last giant phase, it was on channels 2, 4, and 7 not that long ago. It's amazing what some of these clubs do. Novi took the Blessings in a Backpack thing
yes, yeah.
and
Good
decided
program.
that something happens with these kids in the summer. So they did a district grant to do something in the summer, and then they started to get corporations involved. And just to kind of see if they would kick in a little bit.
Yeah.
And it grew and took on a life of its own. So then they got these volunteers that were coming in from the corporations to do things with the kids at noon in the summers, when they would
Oh, wow.
come in and get the food. And so again, it's taken on a life of its own, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And they do several other things in the community. I had this experience where I was going over to speak at the Novi Club, and I was a little early to get there because you never knew about traffic. And I had my pin on, and I ran into the gas station because I couldn't get my card to work in the was just being weird in the gas
Mhm.
pump, and it said, go inside, needs your zip code, so I ran in, and he looks at me and he says, are you in Rotary? Yeah. And so he gave me the whole dissertation on what the club did in the community, including that summer project. And so, having these signature community projects that, you know, that really make a difference. And he said that he said, I don't mind telling you that my kids have eaten in that summer project, so.
You know, our projects have been because we have a couple of members who have a passion or a vision or whatever you wanna call it. Is that true for most of these? I mean, you mentioned that somebody took over this playground for the handicapped kids. Or do you see a club that says, as a whole club, we're gonna take on this? What's your vision of that?
50-50.
Is that right?
50-50. Like the Ferndale Pocket Park, that used to be a big thriving club. Unfortunately, sadly, I think that I heard that they're closing, but they were a huge, well, not huge, but they were like 25, 30 thriving club. They had never done a district grant, wanted to do a district grant, but didn't have a grant writer, and said, well, we can't do a grant because we don't have a grant writer. I said, this is like the easiest application in the universe. So I said, just sit down and tell me what your community needs. Just start describing what your community needs. So that people started throwing out ideas, and 3 or 4 people said, there's no place to sit and talk and gather. And people kind of stand at this particular corner, but there's no place to sit. So, what do you need? So then they kind of came up with the idea, and somebody had said, well, have you ever heard of those pocket parks? So they wrote this little grant about the pocket park. And it started as phase 1, and then it grew and grew and grew, and now it's a whole real park in Ferndale with a benches, and it says Rotary, and so it was something that the community had been talking about needing, and somebody had been to, you know, somebody was on the council, and people knew about it, so a lot
Janet,
of times.
you know what I'd like for you to do, and we'd have to set this up, but I'm sure you've got a whole list there of things that could be great brainstorming material for us. And we have a group that we call the Think Tank, who's responsible for identifying ways of raising money for the club's projects. And so we could pull in Mayor Barnett and the Mayor of Rochester and talk about, you know, what are the community needs, but these are some great ideas to help start them think, as well as us, about what the possibilities could be, because, you know, you already have moved beyond what I thought about.
It's, you know, we talk about doing a community assessment for global grants, but it's, to me, just as critical for a district grant.
Yeah.
What does the community need? Obviously, the community needs a park, and this club has an amazing park. And people know about Rotary and Rotary Park. Trying to be mindful of our time.
But part of what I'm thinking of, Ray, is given that we've got May 15th staring us in the face, and the majority of the club, this is new to us. It would make sense to me that we would focus on the things we're already committed to doing and ask, okay, which would fit?
I'm not disagreeing, Wayne, I'm just
Okay.
thinking beyond this point, at some point in time, because
Oh, no.
we can lay this golden egg this time, but we can't wait till this time next year to lay another golden egg, you know?
You're absolutely correct.
And,
Well, this is a big club, it's a thriving club, it's a club that has people who can roll up their sleeves and do things. I just think people don't know
Yeah, we
what direction to
don't,
go.
we don't.
And it's when you're out doing things that people join clubs.
Yeah.
So the year could be well served coming up with these kinds of ideas, but looking at what the club's already doing, when I was going through these materials thinking about today, and I mean, even things that the Interact clubs are doing.
Oh,
Grants could be written between now and, a grant could be easily written between now and the 15th to piggyback on something that Interact's doing and support Interact.
well, 2 examples, you know, the Interact Day that we sponsored here in the community, those could have been district grants. The work that Phil is doing now with RILA.
Mhm.
You know, Oakland University has got a strong interest in
something
asking us
Pontiac.
to go in and try and help sponsor an Interact Club in Pontiac, which we've already talked to the Pontiac Rotary Club about. It would probably be a community-based if we did it. I mean, this
And we've also
expansion.
got the proposal that's been on the table, and Ron has talked to Brian, the mayor of Rochester Hills, about us having a Rotary Park within the Innovation Park.
That's right.
And, you know, they've got a hand, you know, part of that is for kids with restrictions, physical handicaps,
That's an ideal district grant.
you know. So,
So I was talking to somebody very smart on this subject. Her name was Janet. I think her last name was McPeak. And she suggested that what we as a club
and
needs.
she lowered herself to talk to you?
Well, I had to, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we need a grant committee or a committee that goes, and I'm talking long-term, I'm not talking for the
we
future.
have a place that we want to do that in, so.
Because you mentioned certain people ought to be on that committee, and that's what we need,
Let me get,
Well, I heard that Blake's got great grant writing skills.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. But there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
what does the community need?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you suggested mayors. I think maybe you reach out to, Dave Erdley and
Yeah, the-
Neighborhood House
Yeah.
and
Oh, there's
people like
lots
that.
of different things.
Yeah.
There
Well-
needs to be a process, but if I put my practical hat on and think 30 days out, I don't see any other choice but to get us started and say, okay, what are the things we're already committed to do? We know we can do it. We've got the commitments, we've got the resources, we know, this isn't a pie in the sky. Okay, it's not a grand slam home run. An example would have been, we could be sending some kids from Pontiac to RILA this weekend, along with our kids, okay, by using, a district grant, for example.
you
This,
could be
this park
sending,
idea.
you could be sending some kids from Rochester that
Yeah.
I mean, I see kids in my practice that the families are on those.
We're more than open to that.
Yeah.
We reached out very hard this year and basically pleaded with people, let us pay.
Well,
We'll provide the transportation,
but
we'll
these
take
are-
care of everything.
um,
But that's not,
there's a youth assistance program in Rochester, that person could give us
Yes,
ideas.
just did a thing on suicide.
Yeah, they could give us ideas. Let me get the
Through the-
criteria to you,
yeah.
and I think that'll help you see how easy.
I have a question. Do you have more grants than you have money? Do you get applications
No, you
for
got
more
more
grants than you have cash?
There was a time when we did. I don't know what this situation is for this year. They'll be able to tell you that Saturday.
Do you,
Jay seems to think he's gonna have more grants than money.
Yeah, I think that's probably gonna be the case.
do you reproportion the grants so you can get more grants through? Opposed, one sucking a lot of money, you would cut it down to give more grants? Or you can't rewrite the grants?
I don't know what they'll decide to do. We've done it where you give everybody 90% of what they ask for.
Okay.
If they're all worthy grants. And
Jay
then,
has mentioned that.
yeah,
Okay.
we've done that, because then everybody gets, rather
Okay.
than saying, okay, these are all fantastic grants, but we're gonna take
Yeah,
2 fantastic grants and give them nothing. And then sometimes it's just worked out that there were, it looked like there was many, that the grants were going to exceed the funding, but then 2 of them were checks only, and one of them was, the project, exactly like the project they did last year, which then is a disqualification. So you don't know until you get to the
You
meeting.
have to make each grant unique.
Each grant has to be unique. What I just passed around, didn't make it around, is the
Yep.
district grant criteria for this year. The first one fund, there's nothing too earth-shattering on here. President had to be at PETS, our president was. The president-elect have to sign the memorandum of understanding, has to be in by the 15th. And this is the one that they'll use too, is that if clubs submit more than one grant, then they're asked to prioritize their grants. Because that's the other thing that they'll do is, you know,
Logical.
Ann Arbor typically will submit 7 or 8. And then again, you look at if a big club in Ann Arbor or Rochester are putting in a lot of money into the annual fund.
Well, and that has to be a consideration, because you basically would have the smaller clubs having benefits that they'll never contribute as much as they could benefit.
Well-
And the bigger clubs, because of the $2,500 limit, are never gonna, be able to get all their money back. So there's gotta be some balancing.
Yeah, but the only thing that I would say as a caveat to that is that, what I've seen consistently is that some of the clubs who bill, and don't emphasize a club has to work at growing its giving, I guess is the best way to say it. And there are smaller clubs that give an unbelievable amount of
Mhm.
money. Waterford is one of the largest givers in the district.
Really?
Yes, Clarkston is an incredibly large giver.
Yeah.
And so, and
See,
in our,
Janet, this is part of your unconscious competence. You know things like
Yeah.
what you just said, that if we're really interested in growing our giving, we'd go out to those guys and find out what
Mhm.
they're doing and how they're doing it.
mhm.
So, thank you again for sharing and.
Yeah, so it's not just club
Would
size.
you write that down and talk to the assistant governors of those clubs? Okay, how could we get an introduction?
Okay.
I mean, we'll do benchmarking research. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna give you this right now, propaganda.
Well, you guys said it just like you paid me to.
Yeah, you did, thanks for the intro. This is, some of you are gonna get old and some of you are gonna get new.
Wow, this is a beautiful.
Isn't this beautiful? This is the same thing, except they've just, the new one just changed the cover picture.
Your picture is in here?
No.
I
But,
think you'd already given me one of these, right?
yeah, I did.
You-
I think
Oh, yeah, I
most of
need-
you know, I'm the zone.
Could I have another one?
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Or
you
two?
get 2 more,
Yep.
yeah. This is written to cover the 6 areas of focus. And the reason it's written that way is that, like, I'm the Rotary Endowment Major Gifts Advisor for the zone. So some of you know Kevin Kelly. Kevin's the paid staff officer, I'm the volunteer who's paired with Kevin. So I have the same, like, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Southeast Ontario that Kevin has, to work with clubs and districts on giving. This is my absolute favorite piece of material that Rotary's put together, because it tells the story of what our money goes for, and it does it by area of focus, and emphasizes how the mission of the foundation works, and talks about, like, the possibilities. And I think that's what we always have to emphasize. Just quickly, what clubs do, and I've been sharing it with Ernie, I get these foundation moments, and so I've been forwarding them to him. Sometimes they'll do a foundation moment every week, sometimes they'll do it a couple times a month. I used to do it in the Orion Club, and if I liked the one they sent me, I used it. A lot of times, sometimes I didn't, because it tended to be pretty heavy international. So I would come up with something that was more local, that I knew about from someplace, or I'd pull it out of the Rotarian magazine.
You did that weekly?
I did it weekly, and I kept it to about 30 seconds, and just did it during the announcement time.
Wow.
And I just kept it to 30 seconds, but I always emphasized that you have given to the Rotary Foundation, and so you are part of, you paid for this. And if people hear that all the time, then they know that they paid for it.
Yeah.
And so when I speak,
Eventually they understand.
yeah, I have a budget, and I just plan in my budget, my travel and my whatever for the year, and then I plan to buy these dumb things, and I lug them with me through the airport, or I lug them with me in the car, and I get them to people. I had them at Pat's, because they tell the story that, that grants aren't free. I mean, that's how the foundation started, because it takes people doing work, and even if we write a check to an organization, that organization has people doing work. So Rotary grants take people doing work, and it takes money because there's stuff involved. And so every penny we give goes to getting that work done. And our foundation is a really amazing foundation. We won Nonprofit of the Year from the Fundraising Professionals Association, which is incredibly difficult to win year before last. You know, we're 4-star. I mean, you can't get a better foundation. So, but people don't always understand that their money,
Yeah.
and it's giving according to capacity. Everybody doesn't have to be, you know, $1,000 a year person or an Arch Clump.
Mhm.
You know, people can give a couple bucks a week. I mean, it all adds up. So it's telling those stories, and that's why I was emphasizing that whatever the club does, it's letting the local community know. However we let them know, because if you don't get more money, and you don't get to do more stuff. You don't get to do more good. So that's how those clubs increase their giving and get to do more stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, there has to be that confirmatory feedback.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because in the end, you have to help them feel good about themselves and what they've done. And if you do that, then get out of their way.
Right.
That's why we've asked the charities president, when they give a check to someone, to ask them how they expect to use it, and then to come back and give another update about what the money was actually used for and what the impact was. So they get 2 references to where their money went for each one.
Right. And, you know, and this club has a strong history of doing some great projects. Strong history of doing great projects. You know, this is a pretty, I mean, the criteria.
I would say this club has a strong history of several individuals doing great projects.
Okay, yeah, and I guess I'm looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, because, you know, up to this point, I don't think the club as a whole has ever applied for a district grant.
Okay, and that makes a big difference.
Yes.
That makes a big difference.
That's why you asked the question earlier.
Well, that's one of the shifts that we're trying to nurture right now. But also, we're trying to help everybody feel, you know, about what we're doing. Okay, not just write the check and forget it. Okay, and because, you know, at our average age, even with all the youngsters that are coming in, okay, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to get sweat equity, okay, like we had 20 years ago right away. We're going to get back to that, okay, with the youngsters coming through and taking over leadership positions. But, you know, like it or not, okay, guys like the rest of us, except for Blake, okay, it ain't possible anymore. We'd love to be able to do it, but it ain't physically possible.
I remember what I did on this Rotary Park. I was digging stumps out of that. I mean, I could,
Oh,
there's
yeah.
no way I could do that today. That was a mess up there.
But
Was
that's
that
also
a grant,
part-
local grant?
No.
District
No.
grant?
No,
No, we just raised money.
that might even have been before that I even knew of grants.
Yeah.
But it's also part of where we've tried to do the joint activities with the youth groups,
Yeah.
okay, and vice versa, because, you know, that again, okay, we're stronger when we're together. And I find that just watch the bake sales. Our members' eyeballs light up when they interact with the young people, because they're not are there are future, but, you know, they've got enthusiasm, they've got energy, you know?
Yep.
And we can all, you know, we can remember that, but we gotta look in the rearview mirror to see it.
Well, we're fortunate enough to have next year's charities president and next year's club president here. So between you two guys.
Really?
Yes.
But,
Really
you know-
what?
Well, the really
And your
retains
damn
to
better
the
be full of
fortunate
ink,
part.
You know, I think every grant does not have to be a physical go out and dig
Big
up
ditches,
rock
huh?
grants. A grant could be a leadership day. A grant could be an intergenerational something day. I mean, there are a lot of things that a grant could be that could involve every member of a club. I started out in the Oxford Club, and there, I was much younger then and didn't catch on quickly to how, I'm still not good at saying no, but didn't catch on at all to what was happening to me, and ended up vocational chair. And didn't understand that that included that you inherited the program at the high school, and right now it's escaping me the name of it, but it was a program that was real popular in the district at the time, and in a lot of districts around the country, and it was for the bottom percentage of the kids academically.
Oh.
Strive.
Strive. Yeah, so I was their Strive chair.
See, I read.
Yeah, it was Strive. I was their Strive chair. And I was determined that every member of that club was gonna be involved. And I found out that I didn't have to even work at it because people were so willing to be involved. And the past superintendent of schools was in the club, and he was not in good health. But I needed people who would sign cards for the kids before exams. And so he chaired the card committee.
Interesting.
And I mean, everybody did something, and I had a waiting list of people to be speakers, because it wasn't a big deal to be a speaker. You just went in, and we had like 3 speakers at a time, and so there's a lot of things, and we wrote a grant to be able to expand what we did, and so there's a lot of things that people can do. The mentoring part of it, and we wanted some retirees who were in professions that because we needed a lot of professions covered. So you can come up with things that are valid and important and necessary that don't require, you know, going out and leadership is so important. I see a lot of, again, I don't live in the community, but I've worked in this community for at least 25 years. And I see so many people who are transplanted into this community and won't be in this community for ever. And they feel real unstable. And they don't have any family in the community. I could see the club having something where they offered something at the holidays, whatever they may be, to people. I mean, it's just kind of limitless what we could offer. Just offered something, because there's people who are so disconnected. You know, they're just a mom and dad and kids living here, and the nearest relative may be in another part of the country or in another country.
Mm-hmm.
And they're working for automotive or some adjunct to automotive, or somebody's here doing a fellowship for so many years. So, I mean, it's just,
Can I
there's
throw
a
a
lot.
question out?
Yep.
I don't know, 6-7 weeks ago, we had the lady from Haven, which is in Pontiac, came in, and we gave her a check from Charities, okay? And I'm not picking on her, but I reached out to Rhonda Panzik. I says, you think we can get some district money for Haven? And she says, I don't think that hits the requirements, or whatever, hands-on or something like that. Am I missing some type of thing?
That's a check.
That's a check.
We did write the check.
No, but you can't just write a
You
check.
can't-
That's
You just can't write a check.
Yeah.
That's what I think I've heard Janet tell us.
I think that if the Haven said, you can come in and do a project here,
Build a playground.
build a playground,
Okay.
That's
We
Or-
just cannot write a check and give it to Haven.
you can't write a check and give it to
And if
Haven.
you remember, one of the projects she described was doing exactly that, building a playground.
If we
Okay.
went to Haven and said, do you still need a playground? And they said yes. And we said, okay, well, tell us what your playground project is and how much is it?
Well, let me call her back then and ask her.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we can get money.
Then we can get money. Absolutely.
But
Okay.
don't forget, you gotta have matching funds.
Well, I have to
Yeah,
come
we have
back to
to-
the, I gotta come back to the, and do the whole process, just like we've been setting up. Interview and what we're gonna do and how's it, gotta meet our 6 areas of focus.
No,
Thomas
no.
is
Oh, no,
Oh, for the,
No,
no, in our charities we do.
We kinda have that, we align with the intent of the 6 areas of, you know, we're not
Our
gonna
club.
do any water wells here.
Yeah.
But we can do something that may relate to education or, maternal and children or something like that. That, not knowing that we could do, you know, that was just the 6 areas of focus, and when I threw that thing
We're
together.
getting rid of like the Rochester Jazz Club or the Rochester Orchestra.
Philharmonic,
got it,
yeah.
got it.
Yeah, so they weren't Rochester, I mean, they weren't Rotary driven.
That's a really good idea.
They were
because
just
we-
writing checks.
That's a good idea, cause we would get a lot of grants that we would feel terrible when we would have to tell the clubs, no, you can't give a check to the local community theater.
Okay.
And then they'd be really
Yeah.
devastated, but we would
so
say,
I'll-
no,
I'll
it doesn't
call
even
her
fit
up,
the
yeah,
mission.
Haven.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, let me just pass this out, I think you probably all, are really familiar with this, but it's on our district website, and when you open up the homepage of the Rotary Foundation website, you get this. And it's just really handy with anything that you're doing, if you're trying to promote the foundation. This gives you the first sentence, the mission of the foundation, it's to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding of goodwill and peace through the improvement of health, support of education, and the alleviation of poverty. And then the blue parts, when you open it up on our district website or the Rotary website, will take you right to all the information on the peace centers, the latest on polio, and the latest on anything about contributing to the foundation. So, like, if somebody asks, how do I give? Boom, you hit contributions, and you can download any form you want on giving. If you wanna know, where are we with polio? Have there been any cases this week? You can boom, hit that blue link and it'll take you there. If you wanna know, where do the Board of Trustees come from? Boom, it'll tell you. So it's just kind of a handy thing to have. And then there's a contact center, and they are fantastic, and they get right back to you. This one, how to apply, you're gonna get this again Saturday, but you guys will have it first. And you
The
already
inside
got it,
scoop.
cause you got
Yep.
this book. But it's so easy, you're gonna go to the Rotary website, you log in, you download the application, but you're going to need to, cause I'm gonna give it to you in about 5 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. You fill out the form, and then you scan the form and you send it as an attachment to good old Joe Bowman.
Keep hearing that name.
Yeah, I've known Joe forever. Good guy. Okay, so here comes the grant application, and I am telling you, we have worked years on this.
Joe
application.
Bauman.
Yeah, used to work for the Oakland Press, yep,
He's a wild and crazy guy.
worked for the Oakland Press and now the Chamber. Let's look at it. So we have someone in our midst who's done grants. Anybody written grants?
No?
No.
Kinda have.
Kind of, okay. This is not a difficult application. It's intended to not be a difficult application. You download it and then you type.
Well, we took a vote before the meeting started, Blake's the only one worthy of investing. So, he is our official trainee, we're happy to mentor you.
Yeah, and I will be.
Go, Blake, go.
I will be glad to do anything I can. This is not a difficult application. You describe your project, its location,
Yeah.
its objective, and its total cost. And, your opportunity to briefly tell its case statement for the impact, why it's needed, the difference it will make, how Rotarians will be involved, or anything else that has your club excited about its merit. And then you do a concise, itemized budget for your project. It's acceptable to categorize. What's your club's financial commitment? The amount of the grant you're requesting. We've already been through this detail, and so,
So the amount of the grant you're requesting is just the portion of the matching fund, or is it the total?
it cannot exceed 50% of your club's financial commitment to the project, so.
Okay, so then.
Or
you should-
2,500, whichever
It
is
is the
less.
physical grant
Yeah.
amount, yeah.
A $5,000 commitment could receive a grant of 2,500. Yeah, so same thing, and I don't know why they have the next one in.
This grant is made on paper and we send it to Joe, or is this available online and we send it to Joe?
So far, you can't do it online. You have to scan it and send it as an attachment.
Okay,
Yeah, they've.
so
worked
this is
with-
paper
Yeah.
and save, okay.
Yeah, those are those directions that I just gave you. You have to download it, save it, and then scan it and send it. And they'll go over that on Saturday.
Okay,
Then you identify the cooperating organizations, if any, that you're endorsing as reputable, responsible, and acting within the laws of the project country. That's mostly if you're doing international. But some people are working with, like if we were doing it with Haven, then we would identify Haven. If we were doing it with Head Start, or we were doing whoever, you'd identify who they are. And then the name and contact information for 2 Rotarians in the club that are sponsoring the project. And then 2 Rotarians that have gotten the final report form. And I'll give you that in a second. Let me go ahead and give you that. And then I gave you then I made copy of some sample grants for you.
Doing great. Doing a great job.
Who in our club is working with Innovation Park, Rhonda Little?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's a great idea. I can't recommend enough doing something in community.
yeah.
Because again, people that can't necessarily go out and bang tools or carry heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Can be sitting at a table underneath a tent, serving
Refreshments, huh?
serving refreshments. Yep, and could be writing thank you notes, and could be doing, helping to do press releases, and can be helping to make phone calls, and
So, one of the things that I'm sure as we go forward, or try to go forward beyond this May 15th deadline, is to really more clearly understand what Rotarians in Action, or whatever the marketing term we're using.
Rotarians in Action is the term.
Yeah. What that action would look like, because what Rodney tried to do this year is try and get some snippets, pictures of people doing stuff, whatever, so that we could post them on our website, or, somehow included in communications outside the club, just to kind of get Rotarians in action, see what we're doing in your community kind of thing. But we write a lot of checks. We write checks to people like Neighborhood House because they can do better than we can do ourselves, because they have the knowledge, experience, and the network to do what they do. If we just, okay, the 5 of us, let's go find some people who need clothing or training or something like that, we would not be very effective, and it's not
No,
very sustainable.
Wouldn't make any sense.
But we write a check to do that. But whenever they moved to their new location, we went in there and helped take lockers out and do some hands-on physical labor. So that difference between hands-on physical labor and handing out refreshments and writing a check, that's white to black, and there's some gray area in between that still is Rotarians in Action.
Yeah, there's,
We even found the company to come in and take
Yeah.
the lockers out
Yeah.
that they needed to get rid of, and they did it as a tax donation. Because, it was part of our ability to network. And it's one of the things I hope we never lose, because I think that's part of what makes Rotary Rotary.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So you gave us this final report.
Yep, the final report looks almost identical to, have there been any changes to the grant since the original application? Sometimes there are. An example, there was a club over in, one of the clubs in Canada was doing a park project. And it was a giant splash park. And they were going to do it in phases, and the community began to embrace it, so people in the community started to donate right and left. So, they said, well, what should we do? Should we give the money back? And I said, oh, you never give money back. I said, invite me over. So they invited me over.
Scope drift.
And so I said, okay, get a few people together and invite me over. So we had a brainstorming session, and we said, okay, if you could have additional things in your park, what else would you have? So one of the things that came up was that they didn't have anything for kids who were physically challenged. And so if you could have other things in your park, what would you wish for? So there was a whole list of stuff that they had cut because they didn't have money. And so there were all kinds of changes over the different phases. And you should see this splash park that they built over 3 years. The same thing happened. All the clubs in Ontario, in Chatham, got together to do this hospice thing. And so they actually, and that was their whole Beach Boys concert, and they ended up being major players as catalysts to get the hospice built
Wow.
in Chatham, Kent.
So you said the splash park was a 3-year project.
Mhm.
So how did it handle?
3 phases,
3 phases, so
3 district grants,
you 3 different grants, they're unique because they're different phases.
completely different
Even though they're
phases.
the same project.
even though they're 2 parts of the same project.
Okay.
So again, that could be done with
Innovation Park.
Innovation Park, yep. It could be a more than 3-year project, yep. I think Royal Oak has done Blessings in a Backpack for I don't know how many years, because they keep doing different things,
Aspects of it, huh?
different aspects, with it. And then, so it could change, how's your club been involved, and then the rest of it just has to do with completion date. The documents, it's really important, and you'll hear it at the grant management seminar, strongly recommending electronic filing and knowing who, more than one person who's got it. Because districts are getting audited, so it's important to have. Need some
So-
copies, yeah,
While you're handing those out,
yeah.
you say districts are getting audited, which
Which
means
means
clubs are
clubs.
getting
Clubs
audited.
will be asked.
And what kind of documentation has to be maintained?
It's all spelled out in memorandum of understanding.
Okay.
Every check that's written and receipts for everything that's purchased.
Okay.
You say they're getting audited for grants, is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
for
So
grants. And so, I think the rule is for everything under $75, I'm paranoid, I just give a receipt for everything.
Yeah.
They really laughed at Linda and Jay and I in that grant, because if it was a bag of nails for a couple of pesos, we had a receipt, but we weren't gonna
Yeah.
not have it, and that's how I ran,
Well, and that gives auditors confidence that you've been
yeah.
keeping track of everything.
And that's
so.
how I do my expense reports, they get every map quest, they get every, cause I just don't wanna be. Okay, so, not surprising that one of the models that was on the website, is a Linda Eastman grant. And this was the Guatemalan Women's Health Initiative. And you'll have it to go through, but, just key things that, are important in wording. And I wish there'd been a local one on there, but there wasn't, and I had passed my files on. But let's say that we were doing that part. What would really be important in that opening paragraph, like she talks in the initiative, it's focused on empowering 150 Indigenous women. It would be, the park is focused on meeting the needs of, and we ought to be able to get an estimate of,
The number of people that are in that category.
700 or 800
Yeah.
Kids, special needs kids, who, it's probably way more than that, because the special ed department in Rochester would know how many kids there are.
Yep, and there's demographic information
Right,
available.
Who would, in the Rochester community, and there's probably people from surrounding communities who come in and use it, who would, and this is good wording, improve their health by making use of the park, and it would bring families together, and what it involves. And so that,
If you were going to involve youth, Janet, would one of the other things that would impress the approval is to indicate you were going to involve youth to teach them values?
Well, let's take the thing Tom just talked about, building a playground over there that could involve the Interact Club folks.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely. And Rotaract.
Rotaract
Because
kids.
one of the things Linda did before this project, she went to the Rotaract conference with me the first year we
Yeah.
went to it. She got the Rotaract clubs of Michigan to commit to $20,000. Okay, and there's like 14 of them.
brilliant.
Okay, and I mean, and she wasn't gonna do it, and I said, Linda, this is perfect, go ahead, propose it. And she did, and they caught fire. And the next thing you know, she's got $20,000 she didn't know she was getting. And the Rotaract kids were just elated
Yeah.
because they were contributing to something really significant
Yeah.
that was important to them.
So, and then you get into why is it needed? Well, when we did the pocket park, why is it needed? Well, because people tend to stay in their homes and not know their neighbors, because when people sit down on benches and start to talk, it enhances safety in communities. It was just really easy to get the data. So the why is really important, the difference it will make. When these kids have a place to play, then the parents tend to talk and network, whatever it is. You know,
Well,
if it's.
there is no sense of community if people don't interact.
Right. If it's with, Haven, then Haven would talk about the difference it makes when the kids play and laugh and the parents hear their kids play and laugh, and so it's that wording of, and then again, it's easy to pull data on, I remember writing some of the parts of that Guatemala grant and pulling data on post-traumatic stress disorder and how easy it was. I thought it was gonna be difficult, but how much easier it was than I thought to even go with the internet, to be
Yeah.
able to contact somebody in Guatemala, explain what we were doing, and they sent me back data from the health department
Really?
in Guatemala, so that I had real data of what the stats were in that region of Guatemala, which we couldn't believe. And then how Rotarians will be involved, and that's the part of the people of action. How will the club be involved? How will the people in the club be involved? And the more the merrier. Just the more the merrier. And then anything that has the club excited about its merit. Let's say that it's that Innovation Park. Well, the club has Rotary Park and has been involved in establishing it and whatever in this year, does an annual cleanup.
Weddings or photographs are taken there.
Right,
All sorts of things.
The club values the park it has, and is incredibly excited about being involved in another park in the community. Again, that establishes the history and the club's commitment to another park and meeting a completely different need with the park, and we wanna be known as the club that takes care of, I don't know, whatever it is. Somebody will have
Park
something.
club.
Yeah.
Somebody will have something better than what I'm saying. And then the concise itemized budget. This part is so.
Pretty concise.
This part is
Pretty
so.
detailed.
This part is so important. The budgets aren't big, cause these are not big grants. It's usually like some equipment, or if it's a leadership day, or it's a tutoring thing, you know, it's just typing in by category what the budget's going to be. So they're not big budgets, it's not like
No,
pages.
yeah.
You
So
know,
the highlighted yellow areas in Linda's, are those standard categories, or she just packaged her costs in those different buckets?
She just packaged it that way.
Okay,
And her grant is a $10,000 grant, so it's twice as big as
yeah.
most grants. Or, you know, $2,500 bigger than most grants. And even this, I mean, they're not huge budgets, but you would not believe how many grants get turned in. And, you know, I guess people aren't using Excel, or I don't know what, or aren't double checking, but how many grants get turned in that don't total?
Really?
Oh.
Yeah. And then the people at the table have to make a decision. Do you table it and let them go back and total? And by the way the grants committee works is if you're sitting at the table and it's your club, you have to recuse yourself. You can't even be in the room, because they don't want you looking, they
Yeah,
don't
that's
want
good.
you answering questions. You have to leave the room. But, so it's really important to make sure it totals and that you really look at it and that it makes sense. And it's really a good idea to have just standard practice, have a couple people read the grant that don't have any involvement in writing the grant, so that they tell you if it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because when you're intimately and passionately
Yeah.
involved in writing it.
You know what you were saying,
It makes
right?
perfect sense to you. And then the rest of it's just the pretty dry stuff. So the key part of it really is that number one. Because if number one, and it's really working backwards, it's asking yourself the question, what will be different in the community, whether it's here or international? What will be different when it's done? What will be different when it's done?
Makes sense.
It's just a pretty simple question.
Yeah.
I've always regretted that I didn't go to this club and ask. A few years ago in Rochester, there was a major issue with sexting among the high school kids. I don't know if you guys heard about it.
Yep.
And
One high school in particular, I heard about it, but
it was, and it was at all three. And it was a little bit at the middle schools, and it was a big problem. And at the middle schools, it was even worse, because those kids are really like
yeah.
clueless.
No filter.
Really clueless and
Yeah.
no filter. But they're a little better off legally. Because they're young, I mean, they're younger and just
Yeah,
like
these,
a little bit
these
better.
kids end up having it on their permanent record.
But the only thing that saved them was that when you start gathering phones, then it led to more phones, and more phones, and more phones, and more phones, so that there were so many phones, and so many people, that it just became impossible to sort out.
Mm-hmm.
Impossible. And the laws, as you know, are not written for, they've been working on it since, but were not written for today's technology. And these kids did not belong. They were scary, and they were one time, and they weren't the kind, gentle, ongoing, mentoring kind of things that some of these people needed. And it would have been a perfect thing for a grant, to work with what youth assistance wanted, which was more ongoing
Yeah.
support, and being able to reach out to the different schools along with the police liaison officers to do more training. And I kept thinking, I should go to the Rochester Rotary Club and ask them to write a district grant, because it would be so good. Because they could get people, they would have people who could sit in and probably mentor some of these kids that, and they could have grown-ups there.
Yeah.
And could be so valuable. So, I mean, that's just, again, another example of a huge community need that hasn't gone away.
Well, and just for this group, when we surveyed the Interact kids last year on what they wanted breakout sessions on, number one topic, suicide.
So just as some buckets to keep in mind, I've heard three kinds of buckets. One would be cities, like mayors. Another would be school superintendents, local religious leaders. There are some other things that you might think of. Like, I'm sure there are,
I just thought maybe the police department, you know,
Yeah.
getting
Mhm.
good.
I have to, depart, I have to go back to work.
Yep, the sheriff's substation, the police
Yeah.
liaison officers,
Yeah, that are at the schools.
they're at the schools. Sometimes the superintendent is a good person, sometimes it's the, I don't know, it's the special ed director.
I would argue that I don't think the mayors are the right people to get involved either. They're too political.
My thing with Brian is, whenever I've asked him for stuff, he'd always send me to the right people. So, you know, they have the big picture, and, you know, they may send us to Tom Pardon, the innovation, whatever his name is, who knows? You know? See
I
Tom
mean,
Pardon. Yeah.
I just, my experience with that is that, yeah,
Well,
that's it.
Yeah.
And,
Exactly
and
right.
they're politically motivated and community motivated.
Yeah.
They wanna,
Well, we're looking for community projects, though, right?
yeah,
Or
but,
needs.
yeah, but is it a project in Rochester or is it a
Yeah.
project in Rochester Hills? And never the twain shall meet. That's part of the reason I say don't go to the mayors.
Well, we could have two projects.
I'm
Yeah.
maybe
Well,
I'm biased. I don't know. If you-
You've walked that trail many times.
There's probably
so-
good points on both, but I would also think, you know, those organizations that we've already identified as strategic partners, such as the public school system and OU, I would think certainly would be good candidates for us to collaborate with. Because part of the whole idea of them being a strategic partner is that we believe that 1 + 1 = 3 if they're involved.
Well, there's kind of two issues. There's a short-term issue of what do we
Yeah.
submit by May 15th, and then there's a longer issue of
Yes,
how do
we-
we put
yeah.
a system in
A
place
process in place
so, and we shouldn't get the two confused.
Yeah.
Well, and there's models available for how to do a community needs assessment
oh,
that we don't have to invent.
good.
And that just give you a checklist of where do you go to get a community needs assessment.
Great.
Because, and it'll direct you to, okay, talk to your Title I coordinator. Because that person will tell you, here's how many kids get free and reduced lunch and where the pockets are and.
We're gonna have to get real close to you, Janet.
And talk to your, you know, and the person that's over, you know, the person that's over, you know, if you're over the alternative school, high school, then you have up close personal knowledge of what's going on with at-risk
Well-
youth and.
Argue with me, but to start out, why wouldn't you take the things that we're already committed to do and try now and bolt on this district
We'll
grant
figure out how those
process?
can align.
Okay, I can't imagine something that we could do shorter term. We know we think we've got money in the budget for it, although we haven't set the budget for next year, but we've already been thinking about it. And then it buys us time to put together the right group to start a process and basically do kind of a ground up assessment or a more encompassing assessment for a year from now.
So let me just, argue
I-
with you.
I told you argue.
And I'm not, I think it's an excellent idea. So you're saying we should do a student project geared towards one of the schools or towards?
For example. Or, the Christmas parade. I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box right now. And, you know, we never have float, we have to go borrow a steel one. What else could we do?
That's a hard one to do, because it has to fit the mission.
Okay.
How new is the, Interact Club at the alternative high school?
Ace?
Ace.
5 years.
5 years?
You
And I
think
just-
that's a
and-
good
and-
candidate for something? For example, we give them $900, $1,000 a year for them to go down to
Their senior trips.
the senior trip. I don't know if that qualifies as a grantable,
That's check writing.
yeah.
I just wonder, how old, do you know the principal there?
Oh, she thinks we walk on water, don't leave tracks.
I mean, I wonder what they need. Since we're already committed.
That's a good, it's and it's gotta be a hands-on involvement project, it just isn't writing a check, keep that in mind.
I think that,
It can be coached.
Do they need a
into mentoring or
pocket park?
something.
Oh.
no, probably not, but I know that they always struggle for
Yeah,
Yeah,
stuff, or things, or people.
maybe there's a mentoring,
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
thing
or
that
people
could-
to do things, that
Yeah.
becomes a kind of, challenging group to,
so,
your all-stars are gonna be in your interact club, and then there's
Yeah.
everybody else.
See,
Or,
right now, if I had to flip a coin, I'd take Phil's idea.
what's that?
He believes that we're missing the boat in, when we go after the Interact kids, we tend to get the best and brightest
Mm-hmm.
at every
Yeah,
school.
I remember that.
Okay, and you all know why,
Yeah.
okay, and we've proven that's correct. His argument is basically, okay, that's fine, but go into the assistant principals, go into the guidance counselors, and ask them, what 2 or 3 kids do you have that you're just dying to find something to get them over the edge? Cause you know they can make it, but they need a boost. And getting them some leadership training and getting them to have more confidence in themselves, getting them to be a little smarter about conflict resolution, which are all the
But,
things they learn.
but that would be a next year's project,
Okay, yeah,
so,
okay.
yeah, and it would take
Yeah.
place in the year.
because that's this weekend.
Yeah,
So
no,
we're
no,
not
I
gonna-
understand.
It would be for next year's.
Yeah.
it would be free, but you could
Yeah.
still submit it by
Oh, yeah.
By May
possibly,
15th.
yeah, by the middle of May.
Yeah,
Um,
okay, but it'd be for 2020, that's okay.
So,
that was what was great about that Strive program, was that it took those kids who were not achieving, and many times it was because, like who the one Interact Club gives scholarships to, dad was off, or dad or mom were off serving in the military and the other person was working 2 jobs, or there was something, there was something going on.
Well,
And when that kid got attention and mentoring and heard, just got some help, GPA went up and.
we've
So-
got, Ethan Hoffman is heading up, looking at that, the Strive program and the other Rotary, job, shadowing program, to see if we could expand our own job shadowing program, but I can't commit to that in the next 30 days, cause I don't know if the club's got a commitment to do it.
well, Janet, can you give us the next 30-day timetable? We really gotta dig, plod through. It has to be submitted by the 15th, working
Submitted by
backwards.
the 15th.
There needs to be some pre-review to make sure we've dotted the i's and crossed the t's. Get buy-in from folks so that we know that we have a viable project ourselves. We gotta brainstorm, what do we wanna apply for, et cetera. Are there other kinds of things we ought to be doing?
I think those are the main things. Let me ask a quick question. Are all the kids who are going to Rolla this year, are they all high achiever?
You have ACE kids going?
No, unfortunately, none of the kids from ACE are going. We went to each of the other 3 high schools and asked the guidance counselors to recommend anybody. Unless he's gotten somebody in the last few days, they're all still out of the Interact clubs. But I told Phil, I said, don't be surprised if this takes us a while. To the guidance counselors, we're just, average Joes off the street. They don't know that we love these kids and we're gonna deliver.
Then maybe there's a project to get the ACE kids involved more.
Well, this year is unique, Ernie. Last year we had kids.
Yeah, that's what I
go.
thought, I remember they made a presentation.
Oh, yeah, because, we were over the top about it and even provide transportation, because they, of all the kids we knew, wouldn't be able to provide their own transportation.
How do you think the club feels about ACE?
Oh, I think the club's in love with ACE.
Yeah,
Then that may be some low-hanging fruit if you
Yeah.
want a project in 30 days, if we want a project in 30 days, would be to talk to ACE.
I mean, what do you guys think? But every time I stand up there and talk about, how many of you had more than one chance?
Yeah, no, I think everything we do for ACE, including the scholarships, is well accepted by the club.
yeah.
I'd be shocked if the ACE principal said, no, there's nothing I need. No, I'm well-funded, I
Yeah,
don't
right.
need any help, and really, I don't need any Rotarians to darken my doors. If she says there's something I need, then
Yeah.
I will
I'll
sit
call
down with
Susan.
you
So
and help
then,
you write the
Wayne, that's
project.
kinda in your ball of
Yeah,
wax.
I'll call Susan in the morning.
Then I will help you write that project. Because that's, high-risk kids are like, if we can't write that in an hour, then shame on us.
Well, and two, they offer us, in a business sense, the biggest return on investment, because they're also the ones most likely to not make it.
Well, and they're also,
Okay,
that
and-
program has helped so many kids
Yep.
make it. I personally know one of their incredible success stories.
Well, you heard me read a couple letters
Yeah,
a few weeks ago.
I know many of their
It
success
was
stories.
all I could do to
actually.
make it through.
Yeah.
Janet, this has been overwhelming but very helpful.
Yeah.
It's been my pleasure.
Outstanding job.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate you sharing with us
We get
and,
nominated to do more.
Anytime.
whisper in our ear to keep us
Anytime,
moving.
anytime.
We'll take all the nudging you give us here.
Anytime, I will do all I can.
Well,
Any insights, any other thoughts for what we should be doing?
No, I'm just so excited that, I mean, the grants are where it's at. I mean, it's doing stuff. And it's helping the club understand that, it's an Every Rotarian Every Year club, and then I know because of the years I was foundation chair and that I've been involved with the foundation, that there are many people in the club who give way beyond the Every Rotarian Every Year. And so this club heavily invests in the foundation and is making things happen.
Tell us how Ann Arbor does this, because I know we chatted very briefly about that when we talked. But you say they have a grant committee or a group that,
Oh, they have a grants committee. And.
how big of a group is it?
Maybe a half dozen people,
But
a little bit
they're
bigger.
club members. is
They're
it?
club members.
They're not
Yeah,
the
they're club
community
members.
resource.
And
Yeah,
frank-
no,
and-
they're only for identifying projects, but, to help us identify projects. But, yeah, we've got a group that we put together on the org chart, just like we did for your area of responsibility, that includes district grant, efforts. So,
it is recommended that every club has a grants committee. And the grants committee's responsibilities are to both, encourage members to, develop projects, and then to review projects when members, think that they have a project.
now, the RI org structure would put a bucket, or as a committee, every Rotarian every year, the foundation group. We have our charities, and I'm not sure how many other clubs have their own charitable organization for tax deductible gifts, that are local as well as international and RI. So the question I have is, we had a guy who handled, the Paul Harris's and a few things like that. But that was Ernie's, the concept was Ernie used to focus on RI funded fundraising from our members. Every Rotarian, Polio Plus, the foundation, et cetera, kind of thing. And then, the idea with the grant group would be to identify how we can what grants are available and how we could qualify and obtain money from those. And, I don't know structurally how other people do that. The one in Ann Arbor that Ernie was talking about, is that grant group part of the same group that does this? That's two separate things, right?
No, and I don't think they should be the same.
No, in fact,
Okay.
they-
I will, if you ask me to do that, I
I
will
wasn't going to.
respectfully decline.
No,
I'll tell you
no,
that.
Good.
in fact, their foundation, is not active in terms of making all of those decisions.
Leadership
They just
probably drives
raise,
a lot.
they
It's just
basically-
a parking lot,
Okay, they
and,
collect ideas
and the Toledo Club has a huge foundation, charitable foundation, it's a parking lot. So, I'll be up at 6290 in a couple of weeks, and cause I was curious to see how they do it,
Mhm.
cause they have the same
Who is
split.
6290?
They're the oil well boys.
Oh, in Canada, yeah.
Not
Well,
New
it's,
York.
it's,
Traverse City.
Traverse
Traverse
City,
City,
yeah.
Muskegon.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, and then there's another district I'm gonna be in.
Very,
But-
very active Rotaract.
Oh, but they don't use any of that money for their regular stuff. They raise money. They do a big talent show
Oh,
and some other fundraising. That money is, again,
well, people
for-
would come and watch Ernie in a tutu.
I was gonna say, we could do that, but we don't have any talent.
Yeah, no, they do a talent show. It's a big club. They do a talent show.
We're good at faking it till you make it.
But they do things out of that foundation that the Go Well money is from, like, John Hugo got polio money from them, and it was like a big deal when he did it. But, I mean, they use it for things like that. But they do an honest elbow grease job of raising their money every year. But I can ask Ashish for, I've been a couple of times to their foundation, to their grants committee meeting, and it's really fun to go, because people go in and they talk about it's primarily their global grants, and then once a year their district grants. But then they come back and report too, and it's really, very moving to hear what they're doing, and great ideas. I need to talk to Joe, because I thought that they were going to put all of last year's district grants on the website, and they're not on there. It's worth reading them when they get up there. I know that every year that I was foundation chair, and I was foundation chair for 5 years, I had to give it up the last year, and Jay took it, or no, I guess Don Chisholm did it the last year for me, because I couldn't be EMJ in that. And, but I would sit there and I would be in tears by the time I get done putting
Yeah.
those grants in, because
Yeah.
of the things that people were doing. I mean, it's so moving what people are doing with that money. Simple projects that make a huge difference. They don't have to be extravagant, they don't have to be,
Right.
but they're amazing. I think if people understand that charities bill they get is the $100 to the foundation, that's gonna make a huge difference.
Well, we may have to, we just send out a bill to everybody. I think, did you get up this year and talk about it? Somebody, I think, did.
I didn't,
Um,
but that's part of my plan, which I
Yeah.
wanna talk to you guys
It-
about next
Well,
Tuesday.
even if it's labeled, it might not be that difficult for,
Well, I'd like you, if
Vince could even label it charities bill, parentheses, every Rotarian every year foundation
Yeah.
donation. And then you
Yeah.
get out the information that and the Rotarian magazine, then,
We
and then we
have-
can get the connection to the
We have a
grant.
significant number of Rotarians in our club who have given to that every year, $1,400, who have never gotten any kind of recognition for it.
Then we need to fix that.
I know, it's crazy, it's absolutely crazy.
We need a Paul Harris party.
Well, that's what
Seriously.
I'm,
Wait and do it after July 1st.
Well, because he'll be president then.
well, I mean, to me, it's an ongoing thing, it's not.
Yeah.
And, no one's ever explained what, other than you're gonna donate $100 to the,
Yeah, I would like you to coach or give a presentation to the club next year, whenever we ought to talk to them about
It's
the
gotta be
bills
more
coming.
than one, it's gotta be
Yeah,
an
I agree.
ongoing process.
Yeah,
One
you're right.
presentation
You're
doesn't
right.
cut it,
You're
that's
right.
part of the problem I think
Yes.
we've had,
Yeah.
Yeah,
is,
I agree, you're right.
Let me just, give me 2 minutes, and I'm gonna read off the things that we did 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
okay? That we were all proud of, okay? And there's only about 3 or 4 of them that might qualify for a district grant,
Mm-hmm.
okay? The things that we do over at Neighborhood House, whether it's the back-to-school program or the others, but to me, that involves going to Neighborhood House, who we have already committed to as a long-term partner, saying, what do you need? Okay, along your idea of the schools. There are several here, the Assistance League activity here in town with the backpack.
Well, we help load and unload the truck for Operation School Bell.
Yep.
Whenever they give away,
Would we wanna do more, is the question,
well, but
there's a problem with them.
and fine,
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, they,
Go back to what was the neighborhood house one?
Well, there's several for Neighborhood House, okay? One is we sort school supplies and backpacks for distribution. We also set up desks for their new computers.
we donate books, spiral notebooks and pencils and that kind of stuff when we do the back to school kind of thing.
well, we've given them a lot of money now
Oh, yeah.
for their new building.
Well, we gave them $15,000 for the new building, and we give them $5 on top of that each year.
But those are check activities.
Yeah,
They're just
Right,
pass-throughs.
exactly.
We also do the Christmas party for Neighborhood House's kids.
We know that list, and I think what I would like to do is talk about what we gotta get done between now and May 15th. And tomorrow you said you'd call the principal.
I'll call the principal, but
Okay.
I think we need to go Saturday with no more than 2 or 3
Yep.
projects in mind that we wanna target.
Yep. Okay,
And then we wanna focus on how do we launch in the next 30 days,
Yep.
one of those 3.
Yep.
I'm not interested in launching 3, I'm interested in launching
Yeah.
one good one.
The principal would be a good one, and then looking at the back to school, whether there's more that could be done,
Mhm.
and whether Rotarians could be involved in the distribution.
yeah, basically they bring kids in to neighborhood house, and some people are involved in that.
Oh, we've already got youth, the interactors and rotoractors, they come in and help load the trucks and
No, you're talking about Assistance League now.
Yeah,
but the backpacks,
No, I'm
No,
talking
they
about
don't
back
do
to school
backpacks.
supplies.
yeah.
For-
When they
that's-
pass them out, is there
for
more that, is
neighborhood
there more
house.
that could be done? If she had more, what would she wish
We need
it,
to ask that question.
if she had more than just the school supplies, what would she wish it to be? And
And-
how could we be involved?
And I guess that last question is the one I'd be wanting to understand better, because we just say, bring in pencils and spiral notebooks, and we do, and we don't write a check for that, and then we have people who go over and sort those things, and then they help escort the kids or do whatever, so what we can do, you can write a check for books or whatever kind of thing, but the do part is gonna be the key in the sale, right?
But are
And
there
how it
other,
impacts
are
the
there other
community.
community needs that she's aware of for those
Yeah.
same kids?
That would be the better question than just the book thing.
Right, are there other unmet
Yeah.
needs that she's aware of that,
Okay, who wants to follow up on that one? And
I've got, if I have a quick
Yep.
patient, so I'm gonna have
gotta
to.
go.
Thanks to you very much, Janet, really
Sure.
appreciate
You
it.
wanna follow up
Sure,
on
it's my
that?
pleasure.
What's that? I'm the money raiser, you guys are the money spenders.
I think
Well,
for
er-
next year, that park is
Yeah,
golden,
yeah.
Well,
golden opportunity.
That's why,
That's why I've asked for 3 years now, who is our liaison persons to those key people that we give money
well, we're
to.
just not as smart as you are yet.
Well,
But
oh.
you wanna talk, Do you wanna talk to DeLitto, or do you want me to?
Why don't you talk to Ron?
Fine, I'll talk to him and
Yeah.
I'll chase down Ace.
Okay,
Okay, I don't have a clue who to talk to about, neighborhood house.
well,
I've
Ron
never
would
been
know,
involved with it.
Ron would know.
Alright,
Well, I'll talk
Oh,
to our.
Kathy Lazinski.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's who you have to go to. There's only 2 employees, the development person and her. So,
you're about to lose your bag. Your one strap is dragging.
Got it, thank you.
thanks again, Janet.
All right,
Yeah,
you guys
thank you.
take
Yeah,
care.
this was
Appreciate it.
excellent,
See you
thank you, young lady.
Sure.
And then the next step, Wayne, while we're all here, you may have to noodle on the third one, is that I'd like for Blake, if you'd agree to do this, to help write the grants.
Yeah.
And Wayne, if you set up a meeting to go see for example, the principal at ACE, it'd be great if Blake would be available
Yeah.
to go with you, because if he's gotta write the blank, he's gotta hear the dialogue.
Exactly.
And he'll be familiar with the format, and he can, help drive the right questions.
I totally agree, but you're gonna take her with you.
Oh, well, she's gonna be involved in
As,
that, yeah,
I mean, she lit up like Christmas tree,
yeah,
Yeah.
okay? We don't lose that.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if she has to go to ACE, but
Wayne, I
think,
can't take any more on right now. I got family issues as well
Yep.
as,
Yeah.
as,
Well,